Hello boys and girls, welcome to 3rd grade. I am your teacher, Mr. Ritenour, and if you'd like to make this video bigger, click the button below. Well, today is Wednesday, which means later tonight at 7 o'clock, if you want to hang out with me and your classmates, hop on to Google Meet. The link is right below our class code. Alright, you just click that link. It says Google Meet, and you can join us. So we've had some weeks where we have had mostly girls, but then last week we had a bunch of kids, which was great, and we even played a game of girls versus boys Connect 4, which the boys ended up winning. So girls, make sure you sign on tonight and get your revenge because we're going to play again and see who is better, the boys or the girls, when it comes to Connect 4 trivia. So let's kick things off today with some common sense. Okay, common sense. When riding an elevator, always wait for those getting out to exit before getting in. This is not just true for elevators, this is true on a bus or a train. You always let the people that are coming off get off first before anyone else gets in. Okay, so you probably have been on an elevator before and you know this rule. Your parents have probably taught you. You let everyone get off before you start to go in. Also at the airport, all right? Same thing. Whenever you're in the shuttle, you let everyone come off before you get in. Here's a video of one of my favorite elevator scenes in all of film history, courtesy of Buddy.
Hello. Oh, beautiful. Looks like a Christmas tree. Sorry I can't ride with you the rest of the way up, but this is where my dad works. Well, have a good time. Oh, I forgot to give you a hug.
All right, so um, I just love that scene. Can you imagine being that guy having to go all those floors where the door opens and having to wait for it to close? But you gotta love Buddy. He's so innocent. Okay, let's move on to our next topic. We are going to continue off of yesterday's lesson and we're going to add and subtract some decimals today. But first, let's just look at some decimal examples to refresh our brains. So a decimal is a fraction with a denominator of a base 10. So something, whether it's 10 or 100 or 1,000, that's what base 10 means. So let's just say I have the fraction 3/10. What's that going to be like as a decimal? Well, you're going to have 0 wholes, and that's what the decimal point means. You're going to have 3 in the tens place. So 0.3 is 0 and 3/10, which is the same thing as this, because really this is 0 and 3/10 as well. Okay, now, what if I have 2 and 3/10? What does that look like as a decimal? Well, how many ones do I have? 2, right? And then I have a fraction of 3/10. So my decimal would be 2 and 3/10, or 2.3. Okay, let's clear all of these and do a 100th problem. What if I have 45 hundredths is a fraction? Well, as a decimal, that would be 0.45 hundredths. because this is my hundredth place. Okay, what if I have 3 and 45 hundredths? Well, doesn't really change much about my decimal other than my ones place is now a 3 instead of a 0. 3.45. Okay, I think we're starting to get it. Let me write a fraction, and then I want you to say the decimal out loud. You ready? Let's do it. Okay, find out if you're right. 0.7. How'd you do? Good? Okay, there. How about go ahead. Did you say 0.4? Good work. All right, what about this one? 5 6/10. As a decimal, it would be 5.6. So you have 5 and the 6/10. 0.6. Okay, let's try one more like that. Let's go 7 and 8/10 this time. Well, as a decimal, it'd be 7. Point tells me that I'm now dealing with a fraction 8 in the tenths place. 7.8. Alright, let's go another place value further. Let's say 24 hundredths this time. As a decimal, that would be good, 0.24. What about 7 and 65 hundredths? What would that be as a decimal? Well, it'd be 7 in the ones, and, or the point, because now I'm dealing with a fraction, and my fraction is 65. Okay, last one. This is a challenge. 4 and 9 hundredths. Okay, here's what a lot of you probably said 4.9. If you said 4.9, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're wrong. Because 4.9 is 9/10. But look, this is 9/100. So the answer is 4.09. 09. That's 9/100 right there. Sorry about that. That was my challenge. That was my trick. Okay, let's see if you can go the other way. What if as a decimal I have 1.5? As a fraction, that would be 1 whole. And that's what the point means. 5 in my tenths place, so 5/10. 1.5 is 1 and 5/10. Let's do it again. Let's do 0.69. 0.69. What would that be as a fraction? Well, as a fraction, if there's a 0 in the whole number, you don't need to put anything. So then it's 69, and that's 2 decimal places to the left. Say 1, 2. So the second decimal place is the hundredths. So my answer is 69 hundredths. It's a fraction. Alright, one more. You gotta do it on your own. I won't tell you the answer, alright? As a decimal, let's do 13 13.99. 13.99. What is my fraction? Well, technically, Mr. R, it's not a fraction. It's now a mixed number because I've got 13 as my whole, and I've got 99 as my fraction out of 100. So 13 and 99 hundredths. All right, boys and girls. Hopefully you'll be able to convert on the Google form properly. If not, you can always come back and rewatch. But let's move on to adding. So yesterday we started to talk about this. We're going to draw some pictures today. I'm confident anyone in this class can just straight up add. 5 plus 3 is 8, 2 plus 1 is 3, decimal point 0. I'm confident everyone can do that. But let's look at what that looks like, okay? So we know it's 0.38, but let's draw a picture. Let's start with my 0.25. So let's just split this into place values here. Let's take a look at my tenths. I've got 2 bars or 2 tenths in red. So, oops, I should probably make all of these infinite cloners here. So I've got 1, 2, and then I've got 1 green one. I'm adding 1/10 in green. So let's add 1 of these. And then let's add, I've got 5 hundredths, 5 of the little cubes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And how many am I adding? How many hundredths in green? I'm adding 3, right? So 1, 2, 3. Okay. So in purple, I'm going to count my answer, right? How many tenths do I have? 1, 2, 3. That's my number right down here, 0.3. And then let's see how many hundredths I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus 3, 6, 7, 8. So 8 in my hundredths. So my answer is 0 and 38 hundredths, also known as a fraction, 38 out of 100. Well done. All right, let's try a different problem here. So I'm going to clear, and let's change numbers. Let's do 0.86 plus let's just do 331. All right, let's do it. So by our last time, we solved the problem first and then we modeled it. This time, let's model it first. So find your 8 bars of red. 1, 2, count with me here. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And now I need to add how many green bars? 3, right? I've got 3 tenths. 1, 2, uh-oh, see, look, I've completed a hole. So let me slide this guy over, because I'm going to need more space. And 3. So what I actually need to do, folks, is I need to get another one of these holes, and I need to stick that guy right next door. So I'm going to lock both of them. Actually, I'm going to take both of them real quick and I'm going to send them to the back of my screen. So grouping, or sorry, order, send to back, and then I'm going to lock both of them in there. Okay, so now I've got, oh, whoopsie, didn't mean to do that. Did not mean to do that. What happened here? Alright, so my apologies about that. So now I've added all 3/10 of the green, and I am onto my hundredth. So I need 6 red cubes. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I've got 6 red hundredths, and onto my last digit, which is a 1 in the hundredths of green. So 1 green cube, and that's going to be my new picture. Okay, so let's figure out my answer. Do I have any full holes? Do I have any completely filled up blue squares? Yes, I do. I've got one hole right here. So that is 1, and then this is a question mark because it's not completely filled. So I know it's going to be less than 1. So 1 point. Now I need to figure out my tenths and my hundredths that I have. I've got 1/10, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hundredths. So 1.17 is what my model is. Now let's add it up. I'm going to use yellow. 6 plus 1 is 7. 8 plus 3 is 11. What do I do when I have a bigger... What do I do whenever I have more than one digit? I have to regroup. So my 11, my 1 goes there, and I have to carry a 1 into my next place value. So what is 0 plus 0? Plus the 1 up top makes 1. And don't forget your decimal point. It follows the columns. So when I add it up, I get 1.17. When I draw the picture, I get 1.17. Very good, folks. Very good. Okay. So let's end here with a problem. I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to tell me what my addition sentence is. So let's take all these guys here and delete them. Delete. And I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to unlock and delete, which means I can bring this back over. Okay, so let me make an addition sentence for you. Oops. Sorry, I'm trying my best here. Okay, so um, what is my problem that I modeled for you? Let's start with the red. How many red tents did I have? I have 2. Don't believe me? 1, 2. Right? How many red hundredths do I have? I have 5. Right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got 0.25. And now I'm adding it to how many green tenths do I have? I have 2, right? 1, 2. And then how many green hundredths do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got. Well, would you look at that? It's like I planned it that way, because I did. You've got the same number of reds as you do greens. So 0.25 plus 0.25, what is going to be my answer? Well, if you just look at my model, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and notice I can regroup. I've got 10 of these. I've got a whole nother column, or a whole nother row. So that's 5 full bars, 5 tenths. So 0.5, and then if I wanted to, I could add a 0 here. I could say it's 0.50. Same thing, right? I could keep adding zeros and it's always going to be the same number. It'd be like me adding zeros this way. It's still 0.5. Now, let's see if the math works in purple. I'm going to write over top of it. 5 plus 5 is 10, carry my 1. 1 plus 2 plus 2 is 5. Decimal point, 0 plus 0. Would you look at that? Same answer. So, looking at this problem, you can tell me it's 0.25 plus 0.25 equals 0.50. Well done, boys and girls. Okay, let's move on to our next topic. So yesterday we finished talking about the Cold War. You remember Putin, the dictator of the Soviet Union. He was an evil, ruthless man who led the Soviet Union into a terrible communist dictatorship that lasted nearly 50 years, from World War II all the way till the early 1990s. So during the Cold War time, it was the USA, the freedom-loving democracy, the bald eagle, versus the communist bears of the Soviet Union, the Russians. It was definitely, look at this. You ever go on a balance beam or a teeter-totter? What happens when one side goes down really hard? Yeah, the other side flies up. Well, it really was a balancing act, all right, between the Soviets and the United States. So let's just recap here. I want you to tell me which side these terms belong. So dictator, does it belong to the USA or the Soviet Union? Left or right? What do you think, Jasper? Yes, a dictator is an evil ruler who takes over by force of a country. All right, how about socialism? Socialism is like communism, where everybody gets an equal share because the government decides what everyone gets. USA or Soviet Union? Definitely the Soviet Union, right, Evan? All right, so the opposite of a dictator is a president, which is what the United States has. Right, London? Now, the opposite of socialism is capitalism, Sophie. Capitalism is what the United States has. Capitalism means that nobody gets to tell you what your value is, all right? The value is determined by who's willing to pay the most. The government does not control the products that you make, like socialism. Okay, now, let's see, Bobby, it's your turn. Who has a democracy? Democracy means that you vote, and whoever has the most votes is the one that's in charge. Yes, the United States, right? What kind of government did the Soviet Union have, Lucas? Look at your options down below. Yeah, they had a communist government, which is not at all like a democracy. A communist government means has, everyone participates and gets an equal say of how things are run. All right. So in theory, communism might seem like not a terrible idea, but if you know anything about human beings, you know that human beings have a tendency to take power and become corrupt and take advantage of other people if allowed. And that's what communism almost always leads to, is somebody bad takes advantage of all the other people. Okay, so we've got a bunch of names down below. The names of the people below are either USA presidents or Soviet Union dictators. What do you think? Reagan. President Ronald Reagan. Very good, Patina, USA. How about Gorbachev, Cody? Yeah, you can tell by the name. It's definitely he was a Russian dictator. Stalin. What do you think, Fish? Yeah, Stalin was the evil guy who started it all. Right here. Joseph Stalin murdered millions of people. How about President Kennedy? What do you think? I just gave you a big hint, Doobie. Yeah, JFK was United States president. Emily. Truman. You should know this from our World War II video. Truman is psych, USA. Remember, President Truman was the one who dropped the nuclear bomb on the atomic bombs on Japan. All right, last one, Khrushchev. What do you think, Willow? Yeah, definitely the Soviet Union. Khrushchev. He was the guy who backed down to JFK when it came to the Cuban Missile Crisis. All right, so whose symbol is the bald eagle? Us or the USSR? What do you think, Michael? Correct, us. How about the brown bear? What do you think, Carson? Very good. That's the Soviet Union, right? I know you love history. The brown bear is the Soviet Union. Although I love brown bears, it's sad that they picked a cool animal for their side. But okay, so who do you think rules the east of the world? The Wiley Soviet Union. Good job. And the West, everybody, the United States of America. All right, so I can check it all. We got 100%. That leads us to today's lesson. Today's lesson is the Vietnam War. So look above, you see Vietnam. Okay, now I'm not going to go more than 10 more minutes here because I want you to be done. after 40 minutes. But there's a lot to talk about with the Vietnam War. We're starting to get closer to modern day. Now, the Vietnam War took place during the Cold War, all right? So it'd be like um, it'd be like you're whenever you're 8 years old, right? It's like the Cold War. It's a whole year, but the Cold War lasted almost 50, right? And then one part of while you're 8, one part is the summer, right? There's 3 months in the summer. So the whole Cold War lasts your entire year of 8 years old, but part of that year you have the summertime. Okay, so part of the Cold War, small, decent sized part, um, is the Vietnam War. So it happens during the Cold War. Okay, sorry that wasn't the best analogy, but I think you get the point. Um, guarantee you probably have or know somebody that fought in the Vietnam War or lived through the Vietnam War, whether it's your grandparents or maybe your great aunt or uncle. The Vietnam War took place during the 60s and into the 70s. So think about that. Your parents are, I would venture to guess safely, that they are too young for the Vietnam War. But their parents may or may not have um, served or was alive during the Vietnam War, most likely. So your grandparents. All right, so let's read a little bit, and then I've got a video to show you. So we're not going to read the whole thing today. The Vietnam War takes a couple days. But as the Cold War was raging and everyone in America was afraid communism was going to spread across the globe, the United States had already fought communism in Korea and Cuba without success. The small Asian nation of Vietnam was in the midst of a struggle between communism and democracy. The Soviets, which is the Russians, remember, and China, they're both communists, were giving money and weapons to the North Vietnamese to take control of the country for communism. In retaliation is a word that means like if your sister comes up and smacks you, you're gonna probably retaliate by smacking her back, right? I hope not, but that's what retaliation means. The US sends troops to the other side of Vietnam, South Vietnam, to defend themselves and to spread democracy across the country. Both sides fought for years in the jungles of Vietnam until the war ended in 1973 when the South Vietnamese surrendered. So pause for a second. You heard me right. The South Vietnamese surrendered. Guess what side we fought with? Yeah, the South. The United States doesn't lose wars, folks, but we did lose this one. When I was a kid, I had a teacher that told me the United States has never lost a war ever. Um, and I believed that teacher, and I thought to myself, yeah, that's the United States, we're so great, we've never lost ever. But as I got older and I did more reading and researching, I realized that my teacher was wrong. We did lose a war, and we lost this one pretty bad. It was the Vietnam War, and it happened um, under some pretty, I don't know what the right word is. It was a war that was fought under some pretty auspicious uh, reasons. Now, I'm not saying I'm not going to give you my opinion, all right? I'm just going to tell you the history. And the history does not say that we didn't have to go into the Vietnam War. History also doesn't tell us that we had to either, right? Basically, the Vietnam War was more of a political decision because of the Cold War in general and our fear that the communists in Russia and China were going to take over the world if we didn't intervene. So in a way, the United States kind of felt like we had to play Superman and um, protect democracy across the world. Okay, so there's two major sides. There is um, those who were for the war, uh, and there were those who were against the war. Let's take a look at a quick map of Vietnam. Alright, so I've got two maps on here. Let me bring this to the front so you don't see the green. Let's look at the map on the left first. Actually, no, I lied. Let's look at the map on the right, okay? The right is a map of the world. Here, you got the United States. Over here, all the way across the world, you've got the little tiny country of Vietnam. Do you see it in orange? So why on earth are we fighting way over there? Great question. I'm glad you asked. Well, because look at the country that it's bordering. You remember this country from a couple weeks ago when we did a tour of Asia. Yes, this is China. And then guess what? Look who else is really close. The largest country in the world. Yep, the Soviet Union. Now it's called Russia. So these two countries were trying to turn this little baby country of Vietnam red. Red for communism. Terrible. Ugh. Meanwhile, we over here in America wanted them to remain a democracy. Freedom. So what happens whenever the Russians and the Chinese get involved? Well, we have to get involved to protect the little man. There was this theory. How many of you ever played the game Dominoes? Do you ever play that game? What happens whenever you set up the dominoes and you knock one down? They all fall, right? It's a chain reaction. Well, there was this theory at the time called the domino theory, where if the United States lets a little baby country like Vietnam turn into a communist country, well then it's going to have a domino effect, and then all the other countries are going to fall and turn into communist, and so then the whole world will be communist except for us. So that was the theory, and that theory is why the United States entered into a war over in Vietnam. Okay, so if you look at the map on the left, you can see I'm going to draw the border here of Vietnam as best as I can. So that yellow is Vietnam. You can see right here it is split down the 17th parallel. That's what it's called. It's still split there to this day. That separates North Vietnam from South Vietnam. Sorry, it's not still split like that today. I'm thinking of Korea, I'm sorry. The country of Vietnam is one country now. But that's where the North and the South were split. And the North, the Viet Cong as they were called, Viet Cong, we'll talk more about them tomorrow. But they were the bad guys, and they would come over and they just destroy South Vietnam. And as you'll see, even with the power of the United States military, we are not able to save the South Vietnamese. So many reasons why, but we'll get into that more tomorrow. Let's finish with a video that explains the Vietnam War.
The main facts about the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War began as a regional conflict and became one of history's worst humanitarian catastrophes. It also changed the way that wars are fought and gave birth to a peace movement that is strong today. Since 1954, a proxy war had been brewing in South Asia. Communist guerrillas backed by North Vietnam, the USSR, and China, known as the Viet Cong, had been fighting the Western-backed South. The Viet Cong wanted to unite the country under one socialist flag. With the forces of the South losing the war and fearing communist expansion, the USA entered the conflict to help fight the Army of the North.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it really quick. So you can see the screen here. On the left side, you've got the Soviet Union and China. Those are the bad guys. Remember, this is during the Cold War. And then on the right, you have the United States and South Korea. So it's communism versus democracy.
The fighting quickly escalated, and successful operations turned the tide of the war in the Viet Cong's favor. By 1967, there were more than 500,000 American troops in Vietnam. In the USA, the anti-war movement was growing. Originally seen as communist sympathizers, this small group grew into a popular protest movement as ordinary Americans became angry about the deaths of soldiers and civilians and the shocking reports about the military's use of napalm and the toxic herbicide Agent Orange. After the deaths of 4 student protesters in 1970, public opinion turned against the U.S. government, and it found itself fighting a war on 2 fronts. The failure to win hearts and minds at home eventually led to the USA's withdrawal. Almost 60,000 American personnel had been killed, and over 150,000 had been wounded. The conflict was a political disaster for the USA, both at home and overseas. Although technically a victory for the North Vietnamese, up to 500,000 civilians had been killed. The total amount of casualties, both civilian and military, is believed to be over 3 million. Both sides had committed war crimes. The ripples of Vietnam can still be felt today. Such huge losses mean that, even now, the USA is unwilling to commit ground troops to conflicts. But if one positive lesson was learned, it was that ordinary people would no longer tolerate the loss of innocent lives in their names. This is a direct result of the peace movement that lives on throughout the world today, stronger than ever.
Okay, so some of that video at the end I don't really agree with, but you get the picture. Vietnam was a loss for us, but it really wasn't a win for them either, because they lost a lot of people. A lot of innocent people died. In general, you could just say that Vietnam was just a big disaster for both sides. So we will pick up there tomorrow, and we'll talk about what happens during the war, not just as far as fighting goes, but we're going to talk about the space race. We're going to talk about the music that came out of it, about how television started to become popular during the Vietnam War, and we're also going to talk about the hippies, okay, and the peace movement that they were referring to. All right, so peace out, as the hippies would say. Groovy, man. Peace. See you tomorrow. Actually, I'll see you tonight at 7 p.m. on Google Meet. Peace.